Wife demanded an open marriage, then got jealous when I found someone better. Now she's begging me to close it. Last summer, my wife dropped a bombshell that completely shattered my world. We were sitting on our back porch after dinner, watching the sunset like we'd done countless times before, when she suddenly turned to me with this serious expression I'd never seen before. She told me she needed more excitement in her life, that our marriage had become too routine, too predictable. At first, I thought she wanted us to take a vacation or maybe try some new hobbies together. But then she hit me with it. She wanted an open marriage. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. I felt my stomach drop and my hands start shaking. We'd been married for 8 years, and I thought we were happy. Sure, we'd fallen into some comfortable patterns, but I loved our quiet evenings together, our weekend morning coffee rituals, the way she'd curl up next to me while watching movies. I thought she loved those things too. She explained that she'd been feeling trapped, like she was missing out on experiences she should have had before settling down. She mentioned meeting someone at her gym who made her feel alive again, and my heart just broke right there on that porch. The worst part was how calm and rational she sounded, like she was discussing what to have for dinner rather than potentially destroying our marriage. I tried to argue, to convince her that we could work on our relationship in other ways. I suggested date nights, couples activities, maybe even moving to a new city for a fresh start. But she was adamant. She said she'd already made up her mind, and that if I truly loved her, I'd want her to be happy. She even had the audacity to say it might be good for me too, that I might discover things about myself I never knew. The thing is, I didn't want to discover anything new about myself. I was perfectly content with who I was and what we had. But faced with the choice between an open marriage or potentially losing her entirely, I reluctantly agreed. The next few weeks were absolute torture. I'd lie awake at night wondering where she was, who she was with, what they were doing. Every time she came home late or seemed distracted, my imagination ran wild. Meanwhile, she seemed to be thriving. She started dressing differently, buying new clothes, doing her makeup more elaborate. She'd disappear for hours on weekends, claiming she was exploring her newfound freedom. She even started going out on weeknights, something she'd never done before. I felt like I was watching my wife transform into someone I didn't recognize. For months, I didn't pursue anything with anyone else. The whole concept felt wrong to me, like I was betraying everything I believed about marriage and commitment. I'd go to work, come home, and try to act normal when she was around. But inside, I was dying. I lost weight, had trouble sleeping, and found myself crying at random moments throughout the day. My friends noticed the change in me, but I was too embarrassed to tell them what was happening. How do you explain to people that your wife basically asked for permission to cheat? I made excuses for why she wasn't around as much, covering for her even though it was killing me inside. Then one evening, about 4 months into this nightmare, I was at the grocery store buying dinner for one again when I bumped into someone I hadn't seen in years. She was my college friend's little sister, and she'd grown up into this absolutely stunning woman. We started talking, and for the first time in months, I found myself laughing genuinely. She was funny, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. We exchanged numbers, and she texted me later that night. Just friendly conversation at first, but I found myself looking forward to her messages. She listened when I talked about my work stress, my hobbies, my thoughts about random things. It was such a contrast to how disconnected I felt from my wife. After a few weeks of texting, she asked if I wanted to grab coffee. I almost said no, but then I remembered that I was technically allowed to do this now. My wife had opened this door, and maybe it was time I walked through it. The coffee date was incredible. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. She made me feel seen and appreciated in ways I'd forgotten were possible. What started as coffee dates turned into dinner dates, then long walks in the park, then weekend adventures. She was everything my wife used to be before she became obsessed with finding excitement elsewhere. She was spontaneous but also reliable, adventurous but also content with simple pleasures. Most importantly, she seemed to genuinely enjoy spending time with me. I started putting more effort into my appearance again, hitting the gym regularly, buying new clothes. I felt like I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been dormant for years. The constant anxiety and sadness that had been my companions for months began to fade, replaced by anticipation and joy. My wife noticed the change immediately. At first, she seemed pleased that I was taking better care of myself, probably thinking it validated her theory about the open marriage being good for both of us. But as weeks passed and I started coming home later, being less available for our usual routines, her attitude shifted. She started asking more questions about where I was going, who I was with, what I was doing. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who had demanded freedom to explore other relationships was now interrogating me about mine. I answered honestly but didn't volunteer details, which seemed to frustrate her even more. The first real confrontation came on a Saturday night when I was getting ready to go out. She was home for once, lying on the couch in sweatpants, and she asked why I was all dressed up. When I told her I had plans, she got this look on her face I'd never seen before, a mixture of hurt and anger that was almost shocking in its intensity. She started asking who I was seeing, how long it had been going on, whether I was sleeping with her. The questions came rapid fire, and I could hear the panic in her voice. I told her I was seeing someone I cared about, and that yes, we'd become intimate. The color drained from her face like I'd slapped her. She accused me of having an affair, which was rich coming from someone who'd been doing exactly that for months. I reminded her that this was what she wanted, that she'd insisted on opening our marriage. But apparently, she'd assumed I'd never actually take advantage of the arrangement. She thought I'd sit at home pining for her while she gallivanted around with her gym crush. The next few weeks were tense beyond belief. She'd make snide comments about my new relationship, question my choices, even try to schedule things for us to do together during times she knew I had plans. It was like she was trying to reclaim territory she'd voluntarily given up. Meanwhile, my relationship with my new partner was becoming more serious. We talked about everything, our hopes, our fears, our dreams for the future. She knew about my marriage situation from the beginning, and while she wasn't thrilled about it, she understood that I was trying to honor an agreement I'd never wanted to make. The breaking point came when my wife decided to meet my new partner. She showed up at a restaurant where we were having dinner, claiming she just happened to be in the neighborhood. The encounter was awkward and painful, with my wife being politely hostile and my partner handling the situation with more grace than I probably would have. After that dinner, my wife's behavior became increasingly erratic. She'd call me multiple times during my dates, create emergencies that required my immediate attention, and even started leaving things around the house that belonged to her gym guy, clearly trying to make me jealous the way she was jealous. But here's the thing, I wasn't jealous anymore. I was angry. Angry that she destroyed what we had for some fantasy about missing out on life. Angry that she'd assumed I'd never find happiness with someone else. Angry that she now wanted to control my happiness the same way she controlled the opening of our marriage. One night, about 7 months after this whole mess started, she came home crying. Her gym relationship had ended badly. Apparently, he'd been seeing multiple women and had never taken their relationship as seriously as she had. She was devastated, feeling used and foolish. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but a bigger part of me was just exhausted by the whole situation. She begged me to end my relationship and close our marriage. She said she'd made a terrible mistake, that she'd realized what she had with me was precious and irreplaceable. She promised to be a better wife, to appreciate our life together, to never ask for something like this again. But by then, it was too late. I'd already checked out emotionally. My new partner and I had started talking about a future together, and for the first time in months, I felt excited about what lay ahead. I'd remembered what it felt like to be with someone who chose me every day, who didn't need to explore other options to appreciate what we had. I told my wife I needed time to think, but honestly, I'd already made my decision. I just wasn't ready to voice it yet. The next few days were filled with her increasingly desperate attempts to win me back. She cooked elaborate meals, planned surprise dates, even wrote me a long letter detailing all the reasons she loved me and wanted to stay married. The letter was particularly painful to read because it contained all the things I'd wanted to hear 8 months earlier. She talked about how much she missed our quiet moments together, our inside jokes, the way I made her feel safe and loved. She admitted that her pursuit of excitement had been a form of running away from adult responsibilities and commitments. But reading her words, I realized that I'd grown during this ordeal. I'd learned that I deserved someone who didn't need to shop around to appreciate me. I discovered that I was more resilient than I'd thought, more capable of starting over than I'd imagined. Most importantly, I'd found someone who saw my worth without needing to compare me to other options. The conversation where I told her I wanted a divorce was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. She cried, begged, even offered to go to counseling or try anything I wanted. But I explained that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to fully repair. She'd shown me that our marriage wasn't enough for her once, and I couldn't live with the fear that she'd feel that way again. The divorce process was messy and painful. She fought it at first, hoping I'd change my mind. She even tried to turn our mutual friends against my new partner, painting her as a homewrecker who'd stolen me away. But the people who knew us best understood that our marriage had been broken long before I met someone new. My new partner stood by me through all of it, never pressuring me to move faster than I was comfortable with, never making the situation about her. She understood that I needed time to process the end of my marriage and figure out who I was as a single person again. Now, a year and a half later, I'm in a completely different place. I'm remarried to someone who chooses me every single day without reservation. We have adventures and excitement, but we also have quiet moments and comfortable routines. The difference is that she appreciates both sides of our relationship instead of taking one for granted. My ex-wife has struggled more with the transition. She's dated sporadically but hasn't found anything serious. She's reached out a few times, asking if we can be friends or if I ever regret my decision. The honest answer is that I don't regret it, but I do feel sad about how everything unfolded. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if she communicated her feelings of being trapped before resorting to opening our marriage. Maybe we could have worked through things differently. Maybe we could have found ways to bring excitement back into our relationship without involving other people. But I also know that some people just aren't cut out for the kind of deep, committed partnership that marriage requires. The hardest part of this whole experience was realizing that love alone isn't enough to make a marriage work. You also need respect, trust, and a shared vision of what you want your life together to look like. My ex-wife loved me, but she didn't respect our marriage enough to work on it before looking elsewhere. She trusted that I'd always be there waiting for her, but she didn't trust that what we had was worth fighting for. I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone go, even when they're begging you to stay. My ex-wife needed to learn some hard lessons about what she'd given up, and I needed to learn that I was worth more than being someone's safety net while they explored other options. The relationship I have now is built on different foundations. We talk openly about our needs and concerns before they become problems. We make time for both adventure and routine. Most importantly, we both chose each other with full awareness of what we were getting, and we continue to choose each other every day. Looking back, I can see that my ex-wife's demand for an open marriage was actually a gift in disguise. It forced me to confront some hard truths about our relationship and about myself. It pushed me to grow in ways I never would have otherwise. And ultimately, it led me to someone who appreciates me for exactly who I am. The pain was real and intense, but it was also temporary. The growth and self-discovery that came from navigating that difficult period has lasted much longer than the hurt. I'm grateful for where I am now, even if the path to get here was more difficult than I ever imagined it would be. If I could go back and change things, I'm not sure I would. The experience taught me things about myself, about relationships, and about what I really want out of life that I might never have learned otherwise. Sometimes the most painful experiences are also the most transformative ones. My advice to anyone facing a similar situation would be to really think about what you want and need from a relationship, not just what you're willing to tolerate. Don't stay in a situation that makes you miserable just because you're afraid of change. And remember that sometimes the person who asks for space or freedom isn't the same person who will appreciate it when you find your own happiness elsewhere. The whole experience changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I'm more confident, more decisive, and more aware of my own worth. I'm also more appreciative of genuine connection and less willing to settle for relationships that don't truly fulfill me. In a strange way, my ex-wife's betrayal led me to a better understanding of what I actually wanted from a partner and from life in general. These days, I rarely think about what might have been. I'm too busy being grateful for what is. My current wife and I have built something together that feels solid and real and chosen, rather than something we just fell into and took for granted. We have problems and disagreements like any couple, but we face them together rather than looking for escape routes. The whole ordeal taught me that marriage isn't just about finding someone you love. It's about finding someone who loves you enough to choose you over and over again, even when the initial excitement fades into something deeper and more sustainable. It's about finding someone who sees routine and comfort as blessings rather than prisons. I wish my ex-wife well, but I'm glad our story ended when it did. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is recognize when something isn't working and let it go with as much grace as possible. The alternative is years of resentment and hurt that helps no one. Now I wake up every morning next to someone who's genuinely happy to be there, and I go to sleep every night grateful for another day of choosing each other. It's not always exciting in the way my ex-wife was looking for, but it's deeply satisfying in a way that excitement alone never could be. That's the real lesson I learned from this whole experience, that sustainable happiness comes from appreciation and choice, not from constant novelty and stimulation. The grass might look greener on the other side, but it's usually just fertilized with different kinds of problems. I'm thankful for the pain that led me to this clarity, even though I wouldn't wish that kind of confusion and hurt on anyone. Sometimes we have to lose something to truly understand its value, and sometimes we have to be broken open to discover what we're really made of. The end of my first marriage was devastating, but it was also the beginning of a much better chapter of my life. I'm grateful for both the ending and the beginning, even though the middle part was harder than anything I'd ever experienced before. Looking forward, I'm excited about building a life with someone who truly wants to be part of it, rather than someone who sees it as a starting point for something else. That makes all the difference in the world, and it's worth every bit of pain it took to get here.